this is how D3 scales look in practice. And so let's say we're trying to use scale linear to map the range, which is the visual channel that it should map to. And so the way that I think about it is we specify the minimum value in our raw data, and it will get mapped to the minimum value in our visual channel. And the maximum value that we specify for the raw data will get mapped to the maximum value in our visual channel. And the way that we use it is that then this function or this series of code will give back a function, and we then pass some value, some raw data value into the scale to get the translated visual channel value. And so that's how we use scales. And then D3 also has some helper functions for us to help calculate the min and max from our raw data. And so we can use D3.min, pass in the data, and then specify how, and then we want to specify like whatever attribute we're trying to get the minimum for. Same thing for the max. And the one that I find the most useful that I use a lot is .extent. And what .extent will do is if you pass in your data and if you specify like the attribute and the data that you want to get the min and max for, it will return So that's how we'll use scales. And let's to hard code much, and you want to be able to have the flexibility of fitting any number of data elements to any sort of width and height. So let's use D3 to kind of apply that flexibility. And also you might have noticed is in my highest value to the top of my container, which is actually 0. So it's kind of like this reverse thing that's going on. And you'll see what I mean when we get into the code. And so let's kind of dig into the code to see how this is happening. So here's the most relevant parts of the code. So this is a data array that's being randomly generated we specify the number of bars we want. This is a Lodash function that I also use a lot that basically given a number here, just create is mapping from a discrete input to a discrete raw data to a continuous visual channel. Discrete 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we're saying that we want to map that to this continuous range of our width, of going from all the way to from our left 0 pixels and our final 7th or 8th bar to all the way to the right, and everything in between. D3, do your magic and figure out what the X position for that should be. And that's the X scale right here. And for the Y scale, we're using a scale linear, so that's continuous to continuous. And we're saying that first of all, I want the maximum value in our data, which right now just so happens to be 90. If I, play around, wrong one. If I play around with the number of bars, that could change. So right now, the maximum value is 62, and then now the maximum value is 79. And so what I want to do is I want to map the lowest number, and in this case, I'm going to just hard code it to 0, to the bottom of the container. And the bottom of the container is this height of the container that I've set. So I want to map the bars with height 0 to the bottom, and I want to map the bars with the maximum, the most, the highest number to the top of my container. In this case, the top is 0 pixels. The and create the number of rectangle elements as in the data. So right now we're creating 6, and we're binding this data to each of our 6 rectangle elements, and we're passing in an attribute of X. And for the X, what we're doing is we are passing in the index to the X scale, and then getting back some number. And for the Y, we're going to pass our data to the Y scale, and we'll get back some D3 scales in practice.